Hello, this is Modern Alternate History, and today we are talking about what if the Whites won the Russian Civil War. A little bit of context first. The Whites were the opposition to the Russian communists when they took power. The Whites did not have a unifying and were a mix of different people and ideologies ranging from socialists, liberals to proto-fascists. Their only unifying factor was anti-communism. Due to internal disputes and overall unpopularity, the communists would win the Civil War. But what if that had changed? What if the Whites had won the Civil War? There are a few major changes we have to make so the Whites can win the Civil War. First, we need the liberals to have more influence in the government so that they can push through one major reform: land reform. Land reform means redistributing land from the rich to the peasants. Sounds pretty communist? Well, it kind of is. But I do not want to get bogged down in politics and explaining it. Take note that most liberals and even some conservatives supported land reform in Russia, and although it was enacted in our world, it was far too little, far too late. Anyways, we also need them to get some decisive military victories for them to have a chance at winning this war. First, we need the Western Army to succeed. The Western Army was a Russian army composed of exiles and Germans who got very near to conquering Leningrad with the help of the Estonians, but failed due to Trotsky raising the morale of the troops and conducting a successful counteroffensive. In this timeline, Trotsky instead does not reach Leningrad and the city is lost instead. But this is still a situation which the Soviets can recover from. That is why we need one more victory for the Whites to succeed. This victory is the Moscow offensive. In our timeline, it failed due to a Russian general Denikin diverting his troops to Ukraine so they could conquer that instead. In this timeline, Denikin obeys command and marches on Moscow, succeeding in conquering it and striking a fatal blow to the Bolsheviks. With three of their most important cities captured, it is very unlikely they will survive. But as a cherry on top, Lenin gets shot. This is not that important as the Soviets would collapse anyway, but it is the nail in the coffin. Due to Denikin not conquering Ukraine, the Poles and other nationalist forces would take control of Ukraine, and they would probably set up a friendly government. The Siberian army unites with the Southern army by conquering Astrakhan. The Soviets would be forced out of most of central Russia, although managing to hold Murmansk and Karelia. Those areas would soon fall as well. This opens the question: what would happen to Russia? There are three distinct chances. A monarchy. B, a republic. Or C, a military dictatorship. The main difference from our timeline is that the Caucasian countries and Ukraine and Belarus. The Caucasian states are neutral, unlike Ukraine and Belarus, which join Poland's Międzymorze. You may find one thing in this map very interesting, which is that the eastern side of the Dnipro is Russian. That is due to the Polish armies not advancing far enough, meaning they only liberated central Ukraine. Meanwhile, western Ukraine and most of Belarus is owned by the Polish. I have opted to go with option B, a democracy, due to it being the most interesting and also likely scenario. The parliament would 565 seats, and there would be 7 major parties and countless smaller ones which I have decided not to include. This particular parliament would be from 1924 after 3 years of military rule. Starting from the left would be the Russian Socialist Party, which would advocate for agrarian socialism and whose leader would be the ex-socialist revolutionary Viktor Chernov. Then there would be the Trudovik Party, led by none other than Alexander Kerensky. The party would be the de facto Social Democratic Party of Russia. Then there would be the two centrist parties, the Cadets and the Octobrists. There would probably be a large military party which would voice the opinions of the army, led by Anton Denikin. There would also be two far-right parties, the Savinkovists and the Union of Russian People. The first one would be a weird mix of socialism, democracy and fascism. The latter would be the anti-Semites, and more radical pros are far-rightists. A probable coalition would be Cadet Octobrists and the military party. But what about Germany and Europe overall, now that there are no communist states in Europe? Well, first, the effects of the Red Scare are mitigated, and due to that, socialist parties are more successful all over Europe. Second is communism would be a much more varied ideology due to the Leninists never gaining control over the Internationale. This also means that Germany would never be ruled by the Nazis due to the communists collaborating in this timeline with the SPD. The reason the KPD did not cooperate in our timeline was because of the Russians telling them not to. This results in Germany remaining democratic, although with a heavily leftist bias. But in this timeline, the Great Depression still happens, and in Russia a famine breaks out, and the government is rocked by instability. This results in 1932 elections being won by the Savinkovists. My reasoning for the far-right winning is due to the party being catered toward the peasants, and due to the party being federalist, they get some votes from the minorities even. I believe the far left would lose due to them having caused a civil war, and the liberals would definitely not win due to them being held responsible for the loss in the war and their inability to hold off the Bolsheviks. A constitutional reform would be proposed by the Savinkovists, which would make the parliament mostly advisory. The reform passed with the support of the Savinkovists, the military party, and the Conservative Party. There is even a chance the Socialists and Trudovics support it. The Polish have succeeded in their plans for a Międzymorze as most of Eastern Europe falls under Polish influence, and if not directly in the faction, most Eastern European states are very friendly with Poland. The new state would be expansionist and try to find new allies due to believing that the Entente betrayed Russia. This new state would fin its first conquest in its south, the Caucasus. Although hard to conquer, they were to only neutral nations that Russia could invade without sparking a major war. Also, the Caucasus was rich in resources such as oil, which could help the Russian military in any war tremendously, as they would not be affected by embargoes. The Unital offensive goes well for Russia, although losing a lot of men and supplies to cross the Caucasus Mountains. Russian troops have conquered most of Georgia and Azerbaijan and have taken Yerevan. The treaty would be as short as the war, ending with Russia annexing the regions and setting up autonomous republics based on the pre-war borders. In Europe, tensions are rising as Russia seems keen on reconquering her old territories and retaking her position as a global power. The Polish Międzymorze, although AHS also geared up inviting Finland to join the alliance against Russia. Russia, meanwhile, has set up a secret pact with Mussolini to split Eastern Europe between them. Soon the pact is joined by the Austrians and Hungarians due to wanting to reclaim lost territory. But tensions had reached a boiling point when Russia demanded Finland to give up Karelia so they have the border further from their capital. Thus, the Great Eastern War has begun. The initial offensive by the Russians is a massive success, with Belarus and most of Ukraine falling in months. On the Baltic front, only Parnu is still free, and Estonia and eastern Latvia has also been mostly occupied. Many nations fearing that Russia wants to reassert their old claims. The Baltic front has practically collapsed, with Estonia being fully occupied, and in Latvia their army had to retreat to the other side of the river. The offensive has successfully continued and taken control of most of central Ukraine, encircling Odessa. The Polish are at their last legs, and if help does not arrive soon, Eastern Europe will be under the hands of Russia. But help does arrive. The Germans and Romanians join the war due to Germany fearing a direct border with Russia, and Romania due to them fearing that Russia wants to retake Bessarabia from them. You should take into account that Germany has not started with major rearmament, and that the leftist government would be quite pacifist, which could make this timeline quite unrealistic. With the help of their newfound allies, they are able to stop the advance of Russia and even push back a bit. This leads to the war escalating, with Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia joining the Międzymorze in their war against Russia. This prompts Russia to call up on the Italians, Austrians, and Hungarians. This is now a full-fledged European-wide war, but with a twist. The Allies would probably not get involved due to fears of Germany or Russia becoming too powerful. The Rome-Moscow axis have pushed into Munich and have occupied parts of Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia. Although the Międzymorze, now named the European Alliance, has conquered most of Hungary and are at the doorstep of Budapest. Major changes come to the battlefield as the Germans attempt a counter-offensive in Bavaria with minor success. But that is not the most important change. The Russians have succeeded in their major offensive in Belarus, conquering nearly all of it and getting near major cities. Also, the Bulgarians joined. Also the year is 1940. Thought you people would like to know that. The Germans continue their successful counter-offensive in Bavaria, but unfortunately that is the best news the alliance has gotten, along with the capture of Budapest, as the Russians have taken control of most of Ukraine. Although the offensive does seem to be slowing. Albania gets dragged into the war with the Italians and Yugoslavs, both invading the nation. But something terrible has happened for Rome. The front has collapsed. Now hold on, you may be thinking that this is unrealistic. Well, my reasoning is that Germany's army would finally kick into full spring, and that the Italian army was and is hilariously incompetent. This leads to Vienna getting conquered and Hungary surrendering. This leads to even further defeats, with the Wehrmacht crossing the Alps and nearing Venetia and Trieste. Many Italian troops are trapped in Dalmatia, and Mussolini has been driven insane by his vision of grandeur. The Grand Council of Fascism soon ousts Mussolini, followed by rebellions by the people demanding a socialist republic similar to Germany. This internal instability leads to the fascists asking for peace. The treaty entails Italy being cut back to pre-World War I borders. The Austrian government would also surrender to Germany, and their treaty would entail annexation by Germany. Now you might be wondering, William, why is Sicily red? That is because I forgot to make it white. Also, Russia pushes into Poland and has occupied nearly all of Lithuania in a desperate last push to win the war. The Russian offensive continues with its massive success, entering Romania and most of Poland. In the European alliance, war fatigue has been growing, and fears that Russia will succeed force the alliance to sue for peace. A secondary reason is not wanting to wage a costly war all the way to the Urals. The treaty consists of Russia gaining minor territories in Finland, Bessarabia from Romania, and swathes of territories from Poland. Many Eastern European states are annexed into Russia as autonomous republics. Hungary loses minor territories to Romania, and Bulgaria is annexed by Yugoslavia. Here is a map of the factions. I will not explain them as I am tired and want to get done with this video.
Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. Thank you.